Hi everyone, I'm Alannah Pentony, and I also just wanted to acknowledge the Larrakia people and pay my respects to their ancestors and their elders past and present. And thank you very much for having us. And also really big thank you to ICAN for organising this forum and for giving us the opportunity to come and talk about some of the policy development that's happening in the carbon crediting space. So following on from Bonnie's presentation, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the recent independent review of ACCUS. So this is a review that the government commissioned that ran last year for about 6 months, and it really was trying to do a few different things. There had been, and probably still is, quite a lot of discussion nationally about the integrity of carbon credit units and their role in climate change policy. And so one of the really key jobs, I guess, for the review was to make sure that the credits are really high integrity so that people have trust in them, so that they continue to have an important a role to play in terms of things like the safeguard mechanism, which is a really important climate policy the government is developing, and so that people keep investing in them. So that was one of a really important element of it. Another important element was to think about how the carbon crediting scheme impacts on the environment and on communities. And there had also been a bit of discussion, and continues to be, I think, around sort of environmental impact from carbon projects, including both good outcomes and negative outcomes, as well as opportunities for the communities that are hosting the projects and running the projects, including for First Nations communities. The review ran for around 6 months, from the middle of last year to just before the end of the year. They received over 200 submissions and met with some stakeholders, and ICAN facilitated some consultation with First Nations group. And I have to say, the feedback that we got from the review panel was that was some of the best consultation that they were engaged in. So thanks very much to everyone who participated in that. The review essentially concluded that the scheme is sound and that has appropriate processes in place. And it made 16 recommendations to clarify governance, improve transparency, support positive project outcomes and co-benefits, and generally enhance the overall confidence in the scheme. And I think it's fair to say that the review found that ACCUS are of high integrity, but that integrity isn't well understood by lots of people in the broader community. And so a lot of the recommendations from the review really are about trying to provide confidence to the broader community that there is integrity in the scheme so that it can continue to play that important role. And the government earlier this year accepted all of the recommendations in principle. So I just thought I would talk through very quickly some of the main recommendations that I think are probably most relevant, and then a little bit about what's going to happen next. So in terms of improving governance, the review really recognised that governance arrangements have a really important role to play in terms of making sure that everyone involved in the scheme has a clear role, and that there aren't conflicts of interest between their roles. And so they made some recommendations around the Clean Energy Regulator and their role, and so that would be focused very much on project monitoring, compliance and enforcement. It made a recommendation to develop a new proponent-led method development process. And so that would be moving the method development function out of the Clean Energy Regulator, where it has been sitting recently, moving it into the department, but really moving towards having a process where the participants in the scheme can identify opportunities for methods and also drive the development of those methods. And it also recommended moving the government purchase of ACCUS to a new government entity. It also recommended establishing a new integrity body. So at the moment, the Emissions Reduction Assurance Committee is responsible. It's an independent body that is responsible for ensuring that all methods meet the offset's integrity requirements of the scheme. And the review recommended replacing that committee with a new committee called the Carbon Abatement Integrity Committee that would have a full-time chair, would be supported with an independent secretariat, and that would have at least one First Nations member, because there's not currently a First Nations member on the Emissions Reduction Assurance Committee. The idea of those recommendations is to really bolster the capacity of that committee to do independent analysis and, again, provide that assurance that people are looking really carefully at the integrity of methods and that they do represent high quality abatement. There are also recommendations around improving transparency and data access, and this sort of touches, I think, on an issue that has come up quite a lot in this group around not just making more information available more broadly. So in particular, recommendations to publish carbon estimation areas, which is the particular part of a project where activities are happening rather than just the larger project area, but also to explore opportunities to publish other kinds of information and to put that on platforms that make it more available to more people. There were also specific recommendations around the native title consent requirements in the legislation. So at the moment, projects can register before they get native title consent, but they can't get credits until after they have native title consents in place. And the review recommended changing that arrangement so that you don't have conditional consent, so you need to get consent up front. And they also recommended providing support to native title representative bodies and others so that you can support groups who are making those decisions about consent. There are also more general recommendations around supporting remote and regional communities, including First Nations Australians, to participate in and benefit from this scheme, and recommendations about regulation of carbon service providers and market advisors. Very quickly, there were a few specific methods that were attracting a lot of concerns about their integrity, and the review made recommendations around those specific methods and how they're implemented. But I won't talk through them because I'm very conscious of time. So in terms of next step, as I said, the government has accepted all of the recommendations in principle, and we are planning implementation. We want to move as quickly as we can on the recommendations, but we recognise that a lot of them do have quite significant impacts for participants in the scheme, and so we require more careful design and engagement and consultation. So we're looking at things that we can do right away, and so there are changes the government is doing to the particular methods that were scrutinised. We have moved the method development function from the Clean Energy Regulator into the department so as an early action on some of those activities. And then we are prioritising some recommendations for early consultation and implementation, and so we anticipate that implementing the recommendations around consent rights would be in that early consultation and implementation phase. And then there are some recommendations that we think will take longer to implement, and so that might include some of the recommendations around making information available on particular platforms. I think potentially some of the work on trying to provide more information about co-benefits of methods might take a little bit longer. We're going to work through those things. And that's it from me.